Hi everybody, this is Joy at Red Pine Quilt Shop. Today we're talking about the Magic Binding Maker tool from Taylor Seville. These are made so that you don't have to bother to turn an iron on just to prep a piece of binding. It uses pressure to crease the fabric for you. So we're going to start by talking about the size differences. The green one that I have in this package is the 2¼ inch wide one. It comes in two sizes, 2¼ inch, and the blue one, which I've taken out of this package, is the 2½ inch size. They're the most commonly used sizes of binding, and this tool has to be the correct size to match up with your fabric size, to keep it folded in half accurately, and to get it lined up so that you make a nice piece of binding. So to use the tool, you're going to want to cut either a 2¼ or a 2½ inch strip of fabric. When you piece a seam on your binding, you should do this no matter how you are folding your binding. You should always make sure that when you're making your binding that you trim your dog ears off and you press your seams open. We always press our binding seams open so that we distribute that bulk. If you make and you always want to make it as a 45-degree angle seam too, because when you make it as a 45-degree angle seam and you press it open, the bulk gets distributed across a wider area. If you made a straight seam, even if you pressed it open, you would be more apt to have a lump on the side of your binding. And if you pressed it all to one side, then the lump gets even worse. So binding seams should always be 45-degree angle, pressed open, dog ears trimmed off, no matter how you are doing the next step of pressing your binding in half. So the way that the tool works is you unlatch it. So I'm going to go ahead and unlatch this one. And I have a piece of binding here that's not been pressed yet. And I'm going to go ahead and fold this 2½ inch binding strip in half. You can start out with either a straight end like I have here, or you can start out with a 45-degree angle end. Either one will work fine. And I'm just going to go ahead and finger press the end of that so that I can slide it into the machine and get it started. So when you slide it into the machine, there are two ridges here. I don't know if you guys can see those in the clear plastic, but that is what you want to make sure you get your binding lined up in between. And then there are two blue rollers, one in the bottom and one in the top, and those are what compress and creases the fabric. So I'm going to go ahead now that I've got it started. I will close the device. That puts the tension on those two rollers, and I will pop those two latches back into place. And at this point, I am ready to go ahead and run my binding through. There's an arrow on the top that tells you the way your binding should be getting fed. And I can go ahead and pull my binding through. It does a nice job of folding it for you. And if you notice you're starting to get it all off, you can do a little realignment. I kind of watch as I'm feeding it in, but it does a really very nice job of keeping it folded evenly as I'm feeding it through. It's a little piece of binding I need for a pin cushion that I'm working on, and I only need one strip of binding for it, so this one I'm just going to feed right through. And now I have a nicely creased and ready to go piece of binding that I can take over and put right on my quilt. The devices both come with a binding storage tool. You can buy these separately as well, but they do come with a binding storage tool. So if you prep some binding, and sometimes it's kind of nice to roll it up so it's not running all over and getting tangled on things as you are sewing it onto your quilt top. So you can just go ahead and wrap that around the storage tool and have it so it is ready for you to sew to your quilt top. So that is how the Magic Binding Maker works. If you have a seam in your binding, you can run this through. I've run this strip through once already. I'm just going to go ahead and run it through so you guys can see that the 45-degree angle seam like that will feed through. So I'll just pop this one back in so you guys can see that that feeds through, and we will run this guy through again. Now when you hit that seam, you might have to pull a little bit harder. You'll feel a little bit more of a tug as that seam is going through, but it will feed through the device okay as well. So you can feed those seams through if you have a big long piece of binding for a larger size quilt. So that is how to use the Magic Binding Maker tool from Taylor Saville. It comes in a 2.5 and a 2.25 inch size, and it's a handy way to get your binding ready without having to bother to heat up your iron. Thanks for joining us today.